what's your story? Like your life story, like how is it playing out? And where are the areas that are just so rewarding and fulfilling and give you ease? Like that's your zone of genius.
Hey there, I'm Goli Kalkaran, and this is Lessons from a Quitter, where we believe that it's never too late to start over. No matter how much time or money you've spent getting to where you are, if ultimately you are not happy, then it's time to get out. If you're feeling stuck and you feel like there's gotta be more, there's gotta be a way to feel fulfilled and excited about what you do, then this is the podcast for you. Each week, I will sit down with an inspiring guest who quit their professional career in order to forge their own path and create a life that they love. Hello and welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us again today. I really appreciate you being here. I know you have a lot of choices, so it means a lot to me. Just a quick update. I did finally start that newsletter I've been talking about. And so if you think that you need any additional help, if you need motivation, inspiration on overcoming fear, how to make the transition, mindset, all of that wonderful stuff, go to the website, lessonsfromaquitter.com, and sign up for the newsletter. I will be sending that out weekly, and it might be a video or an article or something that can help you along the way. So make sure you sign up for that. I am so excited about the guest today because we have Pleasance Silicki, and she had not one, but two major career transitions. And I love the way that she approaches this subject in such a grounded and wise manner. And I think that we can learn a lot from her journey. As you'll see from the interview today, each career that she has had has put her on the path to the next thing. And this is a reoccurring theme that seems to happen in everybody's interview that we've done. And I think it's something that's really worth noting and highlighting is that each step leads to the next one. And you won't just like wake up at whatever your goal is. You just kind of have to start and see where it takes you. And I think that her story is a testament to that. And so what is her journey? Well, Pleasance received her master's in education from the University of Pennsylvania, and she worked first as a teacher and then a principal of an urban elementary school. After already feeling burned out from the job, a school shooting prompted Pleasance to leave her position. She went on to follow her passion for yoga and ended up opening numerous yoga studios around the DC area. After running the studios for a number of years, circumstances outside of her control led her to close down those studios. She is now the founder of Thrive, an online self-care class and community. She facilitates stress management and self-care workshops and retreats to a variety of groups and does one-on-one private mentorships based on Ayurveda, Buddhism, yoga, and positive psychology teachings. Pleasance is also the author of Delight, 8 Principles for Living with Joy and Ease, which was published in 2016. And she is the host of Soulful SelfCare Sessions Podcast. I got to talk to Pleasance about how each stage in her life and each step on her journey led her to the next thing, the lessons that she's learned from pivoting numerous times, and how she approaches her career today. Hi, Pleasance. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited.
I'm very excited to hear about all the wonderful things that you're doing now. But kind of before we get to what you're up to, why don't you give us a little bit of a background of how you came to be a teacher, why you wanted to be a teacher, and a little bit about that earlier part in your career.
Yeah, so I had always wanted to be a teacher. I think I was a little girl and would like run home from school and place all my stuffed animals across the bed and then like take whatever I learned at school that day and try to teach it to the animals. I'm an only child and I was a latchkey kid. So I was alone a lot and would have to create my own fun and joy. And that was it. I just knew I wanted to teach. However, I would say that I wasn't sure what the population I wanted to teach was. And so I went to undergrad in Washington, D.C., which is where I still live. I stayed, but I was a sociology major and psych and fell in love with the issues around race, class, and gender and all of those sort of big topics of sociology. And so I fell in love with urban settings, urban schools. I did my master's at Penn, and they really focus on urban education. They have a wonderful partnership with West Philadelphia Public Schools and the University of Pennsylvania. It's amazing. I just fell in love with an urban environment and teaching and being a teacher leader there. I went on to be a principal of an all-boys public charter school.
Wow. So you went to Penn, and then what did you do afterwards? Did you go on to be a principal immediately, or did you work as a teacher first?
Yeah, I did. I was a teacher first. I was a classroom teacher for about 4 years. And we started a charter school for boys in what is Ward 8 of DC, which is like 100% African American at the time. And I really saw in the public schools a need for an academic institution for the boys in our school. I saw what was happening and decided like that's really what I wanted to do. So that was the school that I went on and became a leader at, was all boys.
Did you have a part in starting the charter school, or were you brought on, once it was running?
I was on the founding board for a year while we wrote the charter and wrote what we wanted and creating the vision for the school. And then we were doing hiring, and I thought I was going to take the year off. Was burning out of the classroom, and I had been studying yoga, and I was ready to take a break, like keep on the board of the charter school. And as we were doing hiring and looking for a location, we actually could not find a qualified candidate who understood the mission and the vision of the school. And we were starting to run out of time. So the board, the head of the school, kind of looked at me at a board meeting and was like, girl, you want to do this? And I was like, I was 28, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'll try it. And I'm scared, and I really want this school to succeed. So I'm in. Yeah.
Wow. And how long did you lead that school for?
So I was there for the first year, the inaugural year, and I left in April of that year. So before the school year was over, due to a school shooting, a tragedy at the school, and one of our staff members was killed, and it was just completely tragic and heartbreaking. And I just fell apart. I just could not figure out what I was doing there, why I was doing this. I was scared. I didn't feel like I could support my staff. I was reaching out to the board around security, and they were not able to guarantee security. And it was basically my midlife crisis, at 28.
I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm sure most people in that situation would have a bit of a crisis. That seems extremely scary. And I'm sure that puts a lot of things in perspective very quickly, because it becomes very real. So you were there for a year, but you were saying that even before that, you were thinking about you were kind of burned out and thinking about it. So before you left, can you tell us a little bit about that? What led you to feeling burned out as a teacher?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, sort of the same thing that I inevitably left for was, a lot of our students were facing trauma, violence, gun violence, poverty. And my method of madness is my genius, my superpower is the same as my dark and my shadow, right? So I loved my students wholeheartedly, all in, all passion, all the time. And I pretty much spent time with them 7 days a week. So I would go on the weekends and pick them up. I had little groups and small groups, and we'd go to the library or the botanical gardens or one of the awesome monuments. We have so many awesome free places in DC to go to. I just loved being with them on the weekends and these other environments outside of the classroom. But eventually the late night calls from the parents, the trauma, the violence and the sadness and the health, it really got to me. It really started to seep into my soul. And the last year that I was in the classroom, I had a student who was really challenging. And we worked with him all year. And he had 2 sisters and a mom and a dad. And all of us, we were like this amazing team, just really working with him and trying to help him. And by May, he was in a good spot. Like he had learned, he was so smart academically, but his behavior, we'd been really working with him and spending time with him. And so I gave him a big kiss. I went off and got married, and I took a week off to get married. And when I came back in June, the first thing I saw in the newspaper was that his dad had been shot and killed while I was away. Oh. And I just fell apart thinking, this poor boy, like his whole life, like we've done all this work. And I just realized in this moment, like I need a break. I'm so involved in all these families' lives. That funeral, sitting with my student at the funeral and looking at his future. And again, this kind of replication of societal things that I had read about, but now it was playing out. Like all these Black men in my life getting killed and raising up the boys. And I fell in over my head. I really did. I felt like I had that big, ambitious, I'm going to change the world. And I really felt totally burnt out and defeated,
I completely relate. I was a federal public defender and I worked exclusively on death penalty cases. And I, also feel like I'm an extreme empath. And so I feel things so much, and it is a superpower, but it is also a downfall. And I think that a lot of times these kind of positions, like you want to save the world, you want to help, but it really ends up almost like killing you because it's just so much to take in. But one of the issues I really faced, I realized, was called martyr syndrome, where it's really hard to leave because even though you're unhappy or it's taking such an emotional toll, you feel like, how can I leave these people? Because obviously they can't leave that situation. And so you feel this unbelievable amount of guilt about having that privilege to say, hey, I don't want to do this, and being able to go to, do something else. And I wrestled with that for a really long time. So I don't know, how that was for you.
I mean, I think that it was basically like the world sort of crashing in and falling apart, because this is what my degree was in. And this is what I was looking at urban superintendent positions, and in terms of programs to learn more about that, like this was my whole life.
Right.
So to walk away, it was identity, it was self, it was feeling like so powerful. Oh, I can do this, and I'm saving, and then not, and being realistic. And the thing that saved me and helped me and moved me through this, so I didn't get over it, I moved right through it, was my practice, was yoga, meditation, and wisdom traditions, learning Buddhism, learning about the archetype that I was playing out and how that wasn't helping, learning about other ways you can serve and heal and help, because in my mind, there was only one way. And I was very judgmental and critical of people who I had gone to ed school with who were in private schools. Like I rolled my eyes at them. Like you sell out. And like I learned and sort of backtracked and saw all the ways I was not being my kindest, most loving, compassionate self, because I was really only using that in one arena. And then in the other arenas, I was a real, just, I probably can't say the word I want to say here.
Yeah.
So, just not so nice to like my friends and my family and my partner of the time was my husband. Like I was really hard to be with. And when I wasn't in school or wasn't in a leadership role, in my community organizations or running the school, I was drinking a lot. I was smoking a lot. I was going to yoga. Like I had all these paradoxes because I was so confused around what I was doing. And I think that that's common in your 20s. I'm not trying to say that I'm so special at all. I'm saying like, here's common human experience. Like we think we want to do something, we try it out. It either works or it doesn't. We use numbing techniques. Like we can learn more about who we are and replicate things or not. I just think it's kind of like all of our story, No,
absolutely. I think, and that's the whole point of this podcast, is that we all are so much more alike than we realize, and in different, even in different professions and whatnot, we all do these same things. But a lot of times we don't take the step back to realize that. We just keep doing it, as opposed to thinking like, hey, maybe this isn't the best thing for me. How can I change this? So, okay, you were saying that you had been doing this yoga practice. So you were doing that while you were teaching.
Yes. Just a student, just learning yoga. And then as I became more in love with it, because this is what I do, is like love something and then I learn how to teach it. And then I like shower everyone I know with it until they're just like, please stop. So I went all in with kids yoga and teaching the kids in my classroom, and I did an adult training. So I was teaching the teachers in the schools that I was working in. And the school that I was the principal leader of, I was teaching the boys' creative movement, quote unquote, because we were in a very religious neighborhood, so we weren't using the word yoga, and the staff. And so it just kind of like slowly grew to be a larger piece of the puzzle, of the pie of my life, and then just infused every area.
When you wanted to leave this teaching position, did you know, like, once I leave this, I want to go on to open up a yoga studio?
No way. That's such a joke. No way. I left because of the crisis and the emergency with no plan. And I am someone at that point in my life who'd always had a plan and followed the plan. And most of the plan was stuff that my grandmother had told me to do. And that worked really well. She told me what to do. I followed it. Everyone was happy. Until it wasn't, right? And when I left, I really did not know. It was a big question mark. And I think that is the scariest part is if you are a planner, right? That having that unknown, losing that sense of control, that fear, it's like, I know now from my spiritual practice that that's real scarcity mindset. It's not trusting. It's very controlling. So I did something very random after I left the charter school in April and walked into this like kind of looked like a clubhouse and it had a really weird symbol on it. It was like a group interview. Bring something you love to work out in. And so I just got called and I remember walking to this interview and I said, I don't know what's happening, but it feels like my whole body was vibrating. So I walk into this clubhouse and there's this weird symbol all over the place. And there's these amazing women. There was a doctor, there was a lawyer, there was me, there was some college girls from Georgetown. And we sat in a circle together and talked about what we love about exercise and movement and yoga and community. And this was the start of Lululemon in DC.
Oh, wow.
Because it was still a private company and it was like a little club. There were no stores in DC. Nobody even knew what this word was, Lululemon, or what the symbol was, or what they did. And they hired me, this amazing little group hired me to become the community manager, quote unquote. So my job, I'm not kidding, was to get paid by the hour to take classes that they were going to pay for.
Oh my, that's amazing.
Yoga, Pilates, fitness, weightlifting, meditation, anything I wanted to do. My role was to be in the community and get paid for it in classes and meet people.
You're like jackpot.
Karma. Like I have earned like this. I was just like, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding. I mean, this role doesn't actually exist in Lululemon anymore. It was like such a moment in time when they could have it. And basically it's a very smart marketing, right? They want to get local people who are awesome and do cool things, like to meet the teachers in the studios so that they knew who to promote and they knew who to work with. And, because there weren't any stores yet. So I did that. And a few months later, I became pregnant with my daughter. And of course, like always, was on the leadership track of Lululemon. So they sent me to Landmark training. Have you ever heard of Landmark?
Yes, I have. But you can tell. I mean, I don't know if the audience knows, so you can let everybody know what Landmark is.
It's a weekend training of sorts.
A personal development kind of self-help in that genre, but it's a very intense, what I've heard, I've never gone, but I know it's like an intense couple of days of really working on your limiting beliefs and getting your mindset correct.
Yeah. The stories you tell yourself about yourself and your relationship. So I went to Landmark, did the training. They had something called the Lululemon Library at the time, which was about 10 business and development books. The Secret was one of them, which I had just read earlier that year. So there was kind of like just all this synchronicity that I know now is like, this was this divine time of like study, practice. And during my training at Lulu, leadership training, they do a lot with goal setting and visioning. And that's where I dreamed, because at this point I'm pregnant. At this point I dream, I want a yoga home for my soon-to-be daughter. I want a yoga home where I can explore baby yoga and toddlers and families and bring this community together. There was not a place that was specifically that way when I was pregnant and looking to open it. I always say I would have gone to work somewhere if there had been, but there wasn't. So I created Little Om Yoga.
So how did you get from that goal setting to opening up a brick and mortar type establishment?
It's very similar to opening a charter school. You
Okay.
make lists, you make plans, you do little action items, you have work blocks every day. It's like little, like you kind of keep at it little over time. The other thing is that I was very immature and naive. I didn't know anything about business. I was all heart. So for me, I didn't even realize, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Right.
And that was a blessing at that time. I would say the yoga industry is very different right now in brick and mortar, and the rents in DC, all of that is totally different. This was 11 years ago. But it's almost like that didn't feel that hard because it was just like following the flow and the intuition. The other thing I will say that I think is really helpful for people building businesses and moving careers and evolving is that I had a trial period. So when I had my daughter, I left Lululemon and they ended up opening a store in Georgetown. It was their second store. And they had a big yoga studio on the second floor. And they called me and said, we know you don't work here anymore, but would you like to offer some mom and baby classes or prenatal upstairs in our studio? So I was able to teach for about 18 months in the studio space. So I was able to try on like, what time should classes be? How much would they cost? How does this feel? So when we opened, I had 400 families that I had already taught.
Oh, wow.
So it was like a really beautiful time to explore that, because when the actual physical location of Little Om opened, my daughter was 2, and I knew that the market wanted this because I had just been doing it.
Whether it was by design or not, I mean, having that trial run and building up a community, I think building up an audience before you launch something is always really smart. And you see a lot of people talk about that with social media and stuff. So doing that is very smart. I think going back to 2 of the things that you said that were also really important is, while everything is overwhelming and it's very hard, I think it's with every business, with everything, it's just a series of little steps. And a lot of people stop themselves because they look at the end goal and they think, oh my God, I can't do all that. But, nobody starts out like that. You take, one step after another. And the second part was, you said that you were naive, but when you listen to so many people that have these huge companies and people that started Uber and Airbnb and whatnot, and when you hear like this common thread that a lot of people say is, if I knew how hard it was, I wouldn't have started it. And that's, a gift, because again, it's taking those little steps to get there that is really important.
Oh, this is such an important part. And there's 2 things I want to say. One is that one of my current mantras, so I turned 40 this year, and it feels like this amazing wisdom and connections and synchronicity. Like, I love getting older and being able to look back in hindsight and think and kind of connect pieces. And so one of the statements that I sort of live by these days is, yeah, I've never done this before. But that's always true. I have never been like this day. Like, I have a 10 and a 7-year-old now. Like, I've never been a parent of a 10 and a 7-year-old. So when I stop allowing myself to use the thought that I've never done this, like, we've all never done this. Like, okay, cool. Now I've got something to work with. So that's been really helpful to me. And the second thing is on the whole thing about if I knew it, I wouldn't do it. So I'll fast forward a little bit, that I had multiple studios for 8 years and then ended up closing them 2.5 years ago now. And that was really economic. Like, literally our building went for sale. We had new owners. They doubled the rent. They were increasing all of our costs. They wanted us to pay the $25,000 for the taxes, like things. It just didn't make sense. It was not going to work financially. It did not make sense. I spent months analyzing numbers, and it was not going to work. So it was very heartbreaking. And I had to make the very painful decision to close the studio. Once I healed, which took almost 2 years, like fully healed from the loss of the studio and the evolving and the navigating, okay, what's next, and pulling my energies and superpowers together. The thing that stands out to me now is that I've done that twice, built something, and it's been a lot. Like maybe too much. And especially because I didn't have the kids, now I'm managing and like working with these 2 other humans who are in my home, who are beings who need leadership and guidance, and they need mama. And this stage of the game, I'm asking that question all the time. Like, my body I create communities. Like, that's what I do in all different ways. But right now, I'm not able to do that in the way I've done in the past, because my true priorities and values align with my family.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot to be unpacked in that. One is obviously that we have to accept that there are different seasons in your life, and that's okay, as opposed to always having to go 120 miles an hour at every year. I think that's a good lesson to learn. But going back, how long was the yoga studio open for before you shut it down?
About 8 years total, from like classes to like in all the different iterations and locations and blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Even that I think is such an important point. And I love your story for this because, like you said, you built another business that was very successful that ran for 8 years. And then it came to the time where you decided that it couldn't move forward. And I think understanding and being okay with that, like we're so conditioned to fear, like quote unquote failure. If something doesn't work out in the most like grand way, then I shouldn't even try it. And I think that this is such a wonderful example of the fact that it was a success and then the time of it passed. And so then you have to evolve again from there.
So here's the thing now, right? Is like, this is just how it is. This is the wisdom. This is the culmination of the learning and the experiences. And like, I have a choice to be intentional and awake and aware and clear about what's happening or not, or I can put my head in the sand and bury and do it again, right? So that's what I teach people now, right? Is like, how do you pay attention to the patterns and habits of your life so that you make inspired actions and aligned choices? Like, that's what I always say is like, is this in alignment? Because if you're saying your family is your number one priority, but you're working 80 hours a week and you're not having that quality time, it's not quality, quantity, all that stuff. Like, they're not a priority. If they don't feel that, your primary relationships, like that's life. Like that's what it's about, So, evolving my yoga studies and practices, I really turned over the past 2 years, just like a sharp right towards Ayurveda. And I'm just studying Ayurveda all the time now, teaching it, incorporating it, because it's exactly the stuff that we're talking about. Ayurveda is about doing things little, like showing up a little bit every day, these little tiny steps. And it's about seasons of your life. It's about being real with the seasons of your life. And 2 years ago, right after, about 6 months after the studio closed, my grandmother, who's my person, like my beloved person, got sick with ovarian cancer. And the season changed is what I always say. Like the external season didn't change, but how I needed to align my life, my work, my priorities, because I care so deeply for this person. So to pretend that her cancer, and I live in DC and she lives in Connecticut. So the reality, it like feels good to be real.
Absolutely.
And not pretend that like, oh, let me take a full client load and let me be the best mom and let me cook all healthy meals and let me take care of my grandma in Connecticut and like keep adding on. Ayurveda is about subtracting. So it's so cool how it shows up and it's so simple. It like makes so much sense.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like now I have to check out Ayurveda because it sounds amazing. So are you working at all now? Are you mostly just at home with the kids and taking care of your grandmother? What is going on with you now? I just note to self, and I just always say this out loud, I feel very triggered when people say, are you staying home with the kids? I am like a very kind and gentle person. And that sentence is like one that makes me want to like punch people in the face. Like it's hilarious how angry I get about it because my ego like feels so bruised. But I love actually saying that out loud because I think it's an important conversation that needs to have some air. Like, why is that so triggering? And like, does that mean you're less than if you were? Like, I'm just really interested in that. So I work full time, 9 to 3, back to back. I'm obsessed with scheduling and planning in a way that feels good. So I do block scheduling and I'm extremely intentional when I want to take a client, or if someone, like I'm working with a middle school right now doing some consulting for mindfulness and self-care for the staff. And when someone will call and say, hey, can you take this project? I actually look at my content blocks. I look at my week and I make a decision. Do I have space for them or not? Do I want to put my kids in aftercare or not? And I just get very clear about the projects I take and the amount of clients that I can have given the kind of deep spiritual work that we do together. So 9 to 3 is basically the deal. I wake up at 5. I'm obsessed with mornings. I'm really annoying in that way. My college friends all roll their eyes at me because I have like a whole day before anyone else is up usually. But that is my time. That's my spirit. That's my that's soul. So
once you have that time, as you know, if you do that, like you're not willing to give it up. It's not like torture. It's like the best part of my day.
Yeah. Yeah. I've actually heard that from a lot of people. I mean, I have an 8-month-old at home, so I'm still not waking up at 5 a.m, but I'll take your word for it. But going back, I actually love that you said that. And I feel the same way. I feel like I'm talking to myself. Like I have the same way. And that's something I'm very much exploring with myself. And on this podcast, I think one of the biggest themes that I really want to touch on is mothers and what they go through. You know, you're sort of damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you're not home enough, you know, you're a bad mother. And if you are home enough, then you're not, you know, this whole feminism, independent woman, you're not doing. And so, you know, we're kind of stuck in between a rock and a hard spot. And I have been exploring with myself for the longest time, you know, when I was leaving law, why I had such a hard time even saying, I mean, my son was like 3 months old at the time, and I had a hard time like saying I wanted to spend some more time at home because I felt this unbelievable amount of guilt and what would people think and all this other stuff. I do think we put on this armor where we feel like we have to constantly prove too that we're not quote unquote, just like, we're not just a stay-at-home mom. We're not just in it. We have to do all these things, and we do all these things. And so we want people to rightfully acknowledge that. And so I'm glad you mentioned it. I think it's something that needs to be definitely explored more. But so what you're doing now, though, it sounds like, I don't know, would you call yourself like a consultant or a coach, and you get to determine who you work with and what you work on?
So right now, very practically speaking, my main revenue comes from, I have an online class and community called Thrive. And that is the foundations of well-being. It's kind of like when you're trying to get your act together, whether it's at work or at home or your health or you run a business, it's just the basics. It's like, how do we build a morning routine? How do we build an evening routine? What does nourishment look like in our life? What does intuitive movement look like? So really blending just the basics. It's like a 6-week online course. It's available at any time. And the community members are very heavy DC because I have a very local presence, but I also have people who are friends and they've come from other areas of the country and the world. So that's super fun because I know that content is there and available to people and it's helpful, right? Like right now. So they have the online community, which is called Thrive. I have a branch of that, which is called Plan to Thrive, which are my people who really want to work with energy management, not time management. People who keep saying like, my calendar, my schedule, I'm overwhelmed, I can't fit it in. Like, that's where we break it down. That's my free guide that's on my website, is Plan to Thrive. It is 30 pages of like 15 years of time and energy management practices that are feminine, because all of these productivity gurus are white males and their needs and their desires are different than ours. And even if we're not talking about male, female, we're just talking about energy, we have to put that divine healing feminine energy into our daily life. And for so many women, it doesn't feel good because it's too masculine. It's too productive. So Plan to Thrive and Thrive are one branch. And then the other branch is the one-on-one private mentorships is what I call it. It's a combination of life coaching and spiritual coaching, but it's not like stuff I made up because it's from the wisdom tradition. So it's Buddhism, Ayurveda, yoga, and I'm obsessed with positive psychology. So there's the modern evidence, the research base, which is just saying the same stuff that my other teachers say, but I love blending that. I'm obsessed with law of attraction and how that plays in with Ayurveda. It blows my mind how the language is similar around your feeling and your care. I don't know. So these are the tools that I teach the women who come to me. I have a local self-care for girls class that feels so sacred, right? It's a sacred circle of girls ages like 4th, 5th, 6th grade. And I teach them the same stuff.
And I think it should be noted that all of this seems like it's branched from having that community, from having that yoga studio. Again, going back to kind of just taking steps, because it leads you to the next thing and the next thing. And you can't just jump there.
Well, and there's like connections and dots and connecting the dots. And like, what's your story? Like your life story, like how is it playing out? And where are the areas that are just so rewarding and fulfilling and give you ease? Like that's your zone of genius, you know? And like putting that together, if you look at it as a practice and you look at it as curiosity and creativity, it's so much more fun than trying to like beat it out of you or work it out of you. Like, I am definitely not into the hustle. Like, I don't like that word. I don't teach that. Were there areas in times in my life where I did that? Of course. That's how come now I know that doesn't work for me. And I would argue most humans, but but some people, you never know. I don't want to blanket everybody, but I love that idea that like the stories of our lives, like where all the dots. There's a woman named Pam Slim, and her book is called Body of Work, and she teaches that in business coaching is like what you're doing now. Your leadership skills that you're developing, the skills you're developing, what you're studying will show up in other areas. It's not like once you're running a different business, you're no longer going to know how to work HR if you've been in HR, or teaching. I'm still a teacher. Like that's what I am in all the ways. I'm still that little girl who's running home and like putting all of those stuffed animals on the bed. Except, on Sunday, it was like 11 women in my living room and we're drinking Ayurvedic tea and we're doing life goals for the rest of the year, so that's what I love is like stepping wholly into yourself when you see yourself, and you're not trying to be someone else.
Do you have any other maybe advice or books that somebody that feels really stuck in what they're doing and, knows that it doesn't align with what they want to do, but is kind of blocked by this fear of not knowing what else to do, where they can get started, what they can do?
So for the book side, this question like makes me shake because I read like 3 or 4 books a week and I always am reading like 5 or 6 at a time. So I have on my website a list of like the life-changing books that I want all humans to read.
Well, great.
So you could link that. But I also wrote a book when I was transitioning between studio and being on my own. Because also, being part of school systems and communities where you're hiding behind the name of the school. Like I don't have a problem marketing Septima Clark Public Charter School or Little Om Yoga. But when I transitioned to being Pleasance Silicki, like that I'm the teacher or that I'm the leader, even though I already was, it was very scary. So in order to up level and upgrade into that new persona, I wrote a book around what transition is like and how do you go through these process and how do you use breathing, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, the stuff we all know, quote unquote, we should do, quote unquote. How do we make it real in our life to help us with transition? So my book is called Delight, 8 Principles for Living with Joy and Ease, and it's on Amazon. I also have a copy of it, free copy of it on my website. I want people to read it and print it out and use it like a workbook. And I do give some books in there that were life-changing. But this also, like, I'm just obsessed with sharing good work and good books and really also allowing people, if you get into it and it's not for you, like return it. That's my other favorite thing to tell people, because sometimes you open something and you're like, oh, I'm not really into this. And then again, we have this, I should finish it. I should read this. And I love the idea of like, but what if it's not speaking to your heart?
No, thank you. That's very generous of you. And I will link both to your website and to the Amazon store for that. And you recently started a podcast as well, right?
Yes.
That's amazing. And so what's the name of it and how can people find your podcast?
So it's called Soulful SelfCare Sessions. And basically, I'm talking about soulful self-care as these Ayurvedic practices. Like that's really what we're talking about and learning about in real life. But a lot of people don't even know the word Ayurveda or what it is. So soulful self-care is just like a delicious nod towards what we actually do. And some of the episodes are alone and some are just teaching episodes and some are conversations with amazing people that I know. And that's on iTunes and on my website and soulfulselfcaresessions.com.
Well, thank you so much, Pleasance. This has been so helpful. But if someone wants to reach out or get in touch with you, is there a better way for them to reach you, or should they just go through your website?
Oh, yeah. You can go on the website. My email's there, Pleasance@Little Pleasance @Soulful Self-Care. I have multiple brands and identities these days, but they all go to the same email that I love to answer. And I love connecting with people. I also love Instagram and I love communicating that way. So definitely reach out. I just really like connecting with other humans. That makes brings me a lot of joy. So
wonderful. Well, we'll link to all that and your Instagram account in the show notes. Again, thank you so much. I've really loved talking to you today.
Yay. Thank you for having me. It was super fun. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening. I can't tell you how much it means to me. If you liked the podcast, please rate and review us on iTunes. It'll help other people find the show. If you want to connect or reach out, follow along on Instagram and Facebook at Lessons from a Quitter and on Twitter at Quitter Podcast. I would love to hear from you guys, and I'll see you on the next episode.